Tolerance is necessary for a society to function fairly, but tolerance of the intolerant only sows the seeds of bigotry and hatred. Quite simply, the paradox of tolerance states that if a society's practice of tolerance is inclusive of the intolerant, intolerance will ultimately dominate, eliminating the tolerant and the practice of tolerance with them. So, what happens if a tolerant society is tolerant of an intolerant religion? The left, under postmodernist theory, prefers to ignore that Islam is, at its core, misogynistic and harmful to women by decrying any misogynistic action thereof as being a personal choice and therefore above criticism. Any criticism posited is painted as being bigoted and presents misogyny and harm to women as being cultural and above reproach. If it would be immoral to beat a woman, then why is that ignored when it is done in the name of religion? If it is immoral to kill, then it remains immoral to kill, even if done to retain honor. Through this critique, I do not mean to insinuate that everyone who is Muslim or who comes from an Islamic culture is dangerous, bigoted, or misogynistic. However, it is undeniable that Islam is a religion that directly opposes women's rights and safety. Often, a criticism of Islam is accompanied by denigration of its followers, and a general assumption that any person of Arabic descent is Muslim and believes in the harshest interpretations of the Quran. It is important to remember the role of socialization from culture, schooling, and religion, which impacts a person's values, beliefs, and worldview. Hence why we can critique the hijab but still respect the woman who wears it, thus recognizing how little of a choice she would have in wearing one.
Hijab is not a choice. That's what we all have to know. It's an obligation. I can't afford it. It's what I say to myself. I can afford dining and standing in front of Allah. And I know that hijab is an obligation. And He is gonna ask me, why didn't you do it? I'm gonna say, I wasn't ready, Ya Allah. I wasn't ready. And He is gonna say, really? What will make you ready then? What? When? The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something, that means I'm ready. He will never ask me to do something I cannot do. I want you all to live with this. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not take or put a servant unless He knows they can do it. So, I want you all to know that hijab is not about covering beauty as we call it. Hijab is redefining what beauty is. Assalamu alaikum.
Why is it that the people who loudly proclaim that hijab is a choice never want to acknowledge that this isn't the case for everyone? What do you gain out of invalidating the suffering of women in places like Iran, where compulsory hijab is literally reflected within the legislation? Next time you want to insist that hijab is a choice for everyone, I want you to consider women like Saba. She was only 20 years old when she was sentenced to 24 years in prison just for removing her hijab. She was charged with corruption and prostitution just for refusing to wear the veil. Or consider Nazrin, an Iranian human rights lawyer sentenced to 33 years in prison and 148 lashes. Her crime? Defending women protesting against compulsory hijab. Many Iranian women's rights activists have been imprisoned simply for wanting autonomy over their bodies. And it's not just countries where hijab is made compulsory by law that women suffer. Consider the stories of women's rights activists living in Malaysia. Mariam was harassed and placed under investigation by religious authorities simply for encouraging women to remove their hijab if they wanted to do so. Or consider Aqsa's story. Even though she lived in Canada, she was murdered by her father for refusing to wear the hijab. It is so embarrassing to see people who were born and raised in the West making videos about how hijab is a choice for everyone. Hijab empowers Muslim women, all the while disregarding and speaking over the women in the Muslim and Western worlds who are still fighting for a choice.
Many liberals and supporters of Islam, both Muslim and not, argue that the hijab is a feminist choice, or at least a personal one, and therefore above critique, similar to how liberal feminism posits personal choice turns any woman's choice into a feminist one. The hijab is a religious garment that covers the head and neck. It is worn for modesty, and as the Bangsamoro Information Office writes, the primary intention of the hijab is to protect women from evil eyes. And referring to this, Allah says, O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to bring down over themselves of their outer garments. That is more suitable that they will be known and not be abused, and ever is Allah forgiving and merciful. Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 59.
Let's talk about that oppressive headscarf that you seem to be wearing all the time.
Oh.
So does God force you to wear that?
No, there's no compulsion in my religion, so I choose to follow it because I choose to follow my religion.
طيب خلينا نروح مشاهدينا ونشوف التفاعل على مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي.
Did your daddy force you to wear it?
He never did. I actually didn't wear the headscarf for 20 plus years, you guys, and I came to it on my own and I love it.
Did I ever force you to wear it?
No, you never did. I didn't even wear hijab when we first met, and then when I came to wearing it on my own, you were kind of shocked.
True enough.
Yeah.
What about your kids? Do you ever think you're going to force it upon them?
Never. Never ever. It'll be their choice.
So then why do you think the media portrays you as being an oppressed woman because you choose to wear a hijab?
Translator at her side, 36-year-old Sitar Khan, making her first court appearance on Wednesday afternoon, facing 2 felony charges.
Assault family or household member, impeding breath, and injury to child.
According to investigators, the physical abuse against her 14-year-old daughter, a result of the teen not wearing her hijab.
The defendant upset the complainant did not wear her hijab at school, beat and choked the complainant, causing her to lose consciousness.
The media will teach you whatever they want to teach you, but guess what, guys? This is my crown.
And that makes me the king.
Yeah.
The decree to wear the hijab and loose-fitting clothes stems from victim blaming, wherein women are blamed for provoking men and their bodies are viewed as inherently sexual. For eliciting a response in a man, the women are to blame in order to cover themselves far beyond what modesty decrees for men to do under the same religious laws. For example, Surah 24:31 states, "And say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, that they should not display their beauty in ornament except that must ordinarily appear thereof, that they should draw their veils over their bosoms and not display their beauty except to their husbands, their fathers, their husbands' fathers, their sons, their husbands' sons, their brothers or their brothers' sons, or their sisters' sons, or their women, or the slaves whom their right hands possess, or male servants free of physical needs, or small children who have no sense of the shame of sex, and that they should not strike their feet in order to draw attention to their hidden ornaments. And O ye believers, turn ye altogether towards Allah, that ye may attain bliss." Sahih Bukhari 874-257 narrated Aisha, "The wives of the Prophet used to go to Al-Manasi, a vast open place, to answer the call of nature at night. Umar used to say to the Prophet, 'Let your wives be veiled,' but Allah's apostle did not do so. One night, Suda bint Sama, the wife of the Prophet, went out at Aisha time, and she was a tall lady. Umar addressed her and said, 'I have recognized you, O Sada.' He said so as he desired eagerly that the verses of Al-Hijab may be revealed. So Allah revealed the verses of Al-Hijab. Slave women were not allowed to wear hijab, and the covering differentiated between free and owned women. Veiled women thus were the property of another man and were not to be assaulted or harmed, while slave women did not have the so-called protection of an owner. This is not unique to Islam, as the concealment of women's hair, face, and bodies is pernicious and historic, of roots and a reach far beyond Islam. Over 37,000 years ago, the ancient Mesopotamian code of Hammurabi made the veiling of men's wives, daughters, and indeed concubines of the upper class mandatory. Though street prostitutes were forbidden from covering, one might surmise because they were deemed public property. Veiling, whether it is the nun's wimple, a bride's veil, or the hijab, as worn by some Muslim women, has always been a symbol of misogyny, undeniable evidence of male dominion and fear of female sexuality. The idea of it being a choice ignores the repercussions for not conforming. On the website Islam Question and Answer, one person asked if being pious in all other ways but not wearing the hijab would lead a woman to go to hell. And the response was, "We cannot say for certain whether a woman who does not wear hijab will enter hell, but she deserves the punishment of Allah because she has disobeyed His command to her. With regard to her specific fate, Allah knows best what it will be."
It's not that simple, really. No doubt, not wearing the hijab is a serious sin. Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned it in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned it in many hadith. As a matter of fact, one of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ saw women who did not wear the hijab and they were wearing revealing stuff or walking half naked in public. He saw them in the hellfire getting tortured and punished. Also, we consider doing good deeds, because good deeds erase bad deeds. We don't know what's going to happen in Judgment Day. Either Allah forgives us and Allah is all merciful, or Allah punishes us and then we transfer to heaven, or you lose. But what we should do and worry about is doing our best in this life. This is in our hands. And in Judgment Day, we hope for Allah's mercy. May Allah put us all under His mercy.
One woman reports that her parents kept telling her that she would have to wear the hijab, that it is my duty to God, and if I refused, I would be eternally punished after my death, not to mention that I would bring my parents into disrepute and upset them. If the consequences for not participating are bad enough, then it ceases to be a choice. Wear the hijab or go to hell for all eternity. Even those who are not religious will be faced with immense pressure and potentially the threat of death. In 2010, 16-year-old Aqsa Parvez was murdered by her father and brother in the name of maintaining family honor because she wanted to wear jeans, go to the movies, work a part-time job, and didn't want to wear a hijab.
This Texas father murdered his 2 daughters in an honor killing, then was a fugitive for 12 years. Yasser Said is an Egyptian immigrant who married Patricia Owens and had 2 daughters, Amina and Sarah. Said planned to arrange his daughters' marriages to Middle Eastern men, but became enraged when they dated boys that weren't Muslim. In December 2007, Patricia left Said and took the girls to Tulsa after he threatened Amina with a gun, but he convinced them to return home. Then on January 1st, 2008, the day they returned home, Said told his daughters he was taking them to dinner, but instead shot them multiple times in his taxi. Sarah managed to call 911, telling the dispatcher that her dad had just shot her. Said then went on the run for 12 years until he was finally caught living with his brother and son. At his trial, the prosecutor stated that Said became angrier as his daughters became more educated and independent. And today, on August 9th, he was found guilty and will be sentenced to life in prison. If you want more detailed true crime stories,
This Iraqi YouTuber has been killed by her father in a so-called honor killing. 22-year-old Tiba Al-Ali lived in Turkey, where she blogged about her life, but was back in Iraq when she died earlier this week. Police had apparently tried to help resolve a dispute between Tiba and her family, but the next day, her father confessed to killing her. An honor killing is the murder of a woman by a male family member for supposedly bringing shame to the family. They still take place in many countries around the world. Tiba's death has sparked outrage on social media and calls for protests in the Iraqi capital Baghdad this weekend. There is currently no law that criminalizes domestic violence in Iraq.
Honor killings and abuse are committed often against women who refuse to conform to misogynistic religious decree. And yet, even in the West, where this type of abuse is not normalized, it is often excused and protected under a belief that this is a cultural thing, therefore above criticism under a lens of cultural relativism. While one should use cultural relativism when considering cultural differences regarding food, clothing, or harmless customs, misogyny is never excusable. Abuse is never excusable. It is both misguided and racist to present abuse as being inherent to non-Western culture, and utterly unhelpful to ignore the need for change in those areas under the guise of tolerance. In a retracted article titled, "Don't Use an Instrument of Oppression as a Symbol of Diversity and Inclusion," Sharif Emil writes, "The hijab, the niqab, and the burqa are also instruments of oppression for millions of girls and women around the world who are not allowed to make a choice. We are currently being reminded of this daily as we see the tragic return of the Taliban in Afghanistan and its effect on the subjugation of women and girls. Girls as old as those in the picture are being sold into marriage to old men. Institutionalized child rape. The mentality that allows this to happen shares much with the one that leads to covering up a toddler. But even in so-called moderate Islamic countries, such as the one I grew up in, societal pressures heavily marginalize women who choose not to wear the hijab. In addition, women in these countries who are not Muslim and do not wear the hijab are often subject to intense harassment and discrimination. I know that because some of the women are in my family. I respect the women who see the hijab as liberating, but we must also remember the women and girls who find it oppressive and misogynistic. Ironically, the article explores evaluating interventions to address social risks to health. A young girl such as the one depicted in the image is typically also banned from riding a bike, swimming, or participating in other activities that characterize a healthy childhood. She is taught, directly or indirectly, from a young age, that she is a sexual object and it is her responsibility to hide her features from the opposite sex, lest she attract them. A heavy burden for modesty is placed squarely on her shoulders. So many women have been traumatized by such an upbringing, which, I believe, frankly borders on child abuse. Is that not a social risk to health? Are these children not a vulnerable population? Of course, the misogyny in the Quran extends far beyond the implementation of the hijab.
Hi guys! So when is it okay to beat your wife in Islam? Never. And I mean never. It's never okay to beat your wife in Islam. It doesn't matter if she disrespects you. It doesn't matter if she disrespects your parents. It does not matter if she doesn't listen to you. It's never okay.
Some verses of note are as follows. Verse 434. Men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other and what they spend for maintenance from their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them. Then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand.
Our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never laid his hands on a woman. If it was okay to do in Islam, he, out of all the people, would have done it. So it's never, ever, ever okay to beat or hit your wife in Islam. Okay, boy? Bye!
Sunan Abi Duwad 495. The Messenger of Allah said, "Command your children to pray when they become 7 years old, and beat them for prayer when they become 10 years old, and arrange their beds to sleep separately." Sunan Abi Duwad 494, the Prophet said, "Command a boy to pray when he reaches the age of 7 years. When he becomes 10 years old, then beat him for prayer." Surah 412. Allah commands you concerning your children. A male shall have as much as the share of 2 females. But if there be females only, numbering more than 2, then they shall have 2/3 of what the deceased leave. And if there be 1, she shall have the half. And his parents, each of them, 1/6 of the inheritance. If he have a child, but he have no child, and his parents be his heirs, then his mother shall have 1/3. And if he have brothers and sisters, then his mother shall have 1/6 after the payment of any bequest he may have bequeathed, or of debts. Your fathers and your children, you know not which of them is more beneficent to you. The fixings of portions is from Allah. Surely Allah is all-knowing, wise. Surah 435. Men are guardians over women because Allah has made some of them excel others, and because men spend on them of their wealth. So virtuous women are obedient and guard the secrets of their husbands with Allah's protection. And as for those on whose part you fear disobedience, admonish them and keep them away from their beds, and chastise them. Then if they obey you, seek not a way against them. Surely Allah is high and great.
Sadly, there's still a lot of third world countries and cultures around the world who have very uneducated practices and rituals surrounding when a woman gets her period. One of those customs is a menstruation hut, and it can be very dangerous because these are very small huts that don't have very good ventilation or protection of any kind. One of the most dangerous things about these huts is the chance of fire. Even though it's illegal in a lot of places like Nepal now, it's hard to enforce that a lot of times, and it's hard to push back against members of your society or your family when they try and make you go into the hut. There are a lot of taboos and stigma and not a lot of good education surrounding feminine health in many parts of the world, including the US. Because it's an issue that's so seldom talked about, even in Western society, a lot of people just don't really understand how the female reproductive system works. I'm a big supporter of this charity called Days for Girls. They go around to a lot of these countries and try to provide education and sanitary solutions to some of their problems. Because this is a very big issue that a lot of girls and women around the world still face.
Surah 2:22-23. And they ask thee concerning menstruation, say, it is a harmful thing, so keep away from women during menstruation, and go not in unto them until they are clean. But when they have cleansed themselves, go in unto them as Allah has commanded you. Allah loves those who keep themselves clean. There are plenty more examples I could cite, but the support of child abuse, the treatment of women as lesser than men, and the rights of men to treat women as lesser are easy to see. Just like Christianity, Islam drives not just personal choice, but often legislation as well.
In Malaysia, 2 women were found guilty of attempting to have sex. They were caned publicly in what was the first punishment of its kind. The 2 women, aged 22 and 32, were caned 6 times each in the Terengganu Sharia High Court after the sentence was read out. This has led to a major outcry in Malaysia, with former Deputy Malaysian Prime Minister and LGBT activists decrying the punishment meted out to the women.
Practicing Muslim, I don't share that interpretation. And certainly that sort of action to publicly, to cane without this proper due process and understanding and show compassion is something that most Malaysians do not accept. In this society and age, guided by Islamic rule or principles, but you know there are excesses. There's sometimes you call debt bondage. A rich guy, marrying this poor girl. I mean, these things cannot be allowed. And then, therefore, the minimum age for marriage is something acceptable.
The sentence was carried out in front of about 100 people at the Sharia High Court in Terengganu, which is a conservative state ruled by the Islamist opposition party, Pan-Malaysian Islamist Party. It was the first conviction for same-sex relations and the first time a caning had been carried out in public in the state.
Now they are not allowing you to have a consensual sex. Who knows in future, like probably they will not allow you to, a same-sex partner to hold their hands in public.
And leave the house, yeah?
Not at 6.
Listen!
Not at 6.
She left the house at 9.
She was 6 when she got married. It does matter. Do you agree with child marriages?
Yeah, but you're...
Do you agree with child marriages?
You are...
Do you agree with child marriages?
You're too emotional.
I'm asking you. I'm asking you a question. Do you agree with child marriages?
Yes, yes.
Do you agree with child marriages?
I'm not going to deny it.
Do you agree with child marriages?
Yes!
Right. That is the problem. The Muhammad's example has led you to the conclusion. Muhammad's example has led you to the conclusion that child marriages are okay. That's a problem. That's why it's a problem.
Afghanistan's neighbor Pakistan, for instance, is currently deliberating over whether or not Islam allows domestic violence. Pakistan's Council of Islamic Ideology, which maintains Islam gives men the right to lightly beat wives or marry girls as young as 9 years of age, will decide if it is un-Islamic to penalize violence against women perpetuated by Mayrams. Meanwhile, former playboy and cricketer Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, continues to brazenly blame women for sexual violence, endorsing his rape apologia through the Islamic concept of purdah. In April, Pakistan's women's rights marchers were booked for blasphemy, in a country where sacrilege against Islam is punishable by death. From Bangladesh to Malaysia to Nigeria, Sharia causes continue to clash with civil law even in Muslim-majority democracies. On June 28th, a woman was given 100 lashes for sex outside of marriage in the officially secular Indonesia's Aceh province, which enforces Islamic law. Even women from Muslim minorities in the UK, the US, India, and other states can face large-scale discrimination in personal matters, including marriage, divorce, and inheritance, if courts allow rulings using Sharia. Some of the Islamic clauses used to deny women's rights come from this 4th chapter of the Quran An-Nisa, which establishes female inheritance as half of the men, upholds male supremacy, and allows husbands to beat disobedient wives. The Quran's chapter 24, An-Nur, mandates lashes as punishment for sex outside of marriage, allows female sex slaves, and establishes sexist modesty codes by asking women to cover up, including their hair, in front of those who aren't Mayrams, so as not to be harassed. Child marriage is often justified using the example of Muhammad's marriage to 6-year-old Aisha, as narrated by Aisha herself in the Sahih al-Bukhari, a compilation of the sayings of Islam's prophet. Jihadist groups like ISIS or the Taliban cite hadiths on forced and sexual intercourse with war captives and slaves to recreate the horrors of sexual violence against women, arguing that they're at war with the West or local regimes. As Hermant Mehta puts it, the conversation around Islam and its role in the modern world is gridlocked. The same tired cliches are repeated endlessly, persuading no one. Extremists on the far right demonize Muslims in the name of combating Islam, while extremists on the left celebrate all aspects of the religion in the name of protecting Muslims from bigotry. Just as Christianity needs to be critiqued for its role in perpetuating hatred against women, so too do we need to criticize Islam, as the issue is not any one religion, but religion itself. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I decided to do this in conjunction with the previous video on Christianity because I don't want to single out any specific religion when the issue is not just a religion, it's all of them. Every religion is misogynistic at its core. You will not be able to find any religion that doesn't have some form of misogyny in it. Even in Cambodia, where Buddhism isn't really a religion in the same sense that Islam and Christianity are. It's more of an ideology. But even so, women can't show their shoulders or knees in churches or temples because, because modesty, because the female body is sinful. And that's something that I just can never come to accept. I don't think my body is sinful. I don't think women are inherently lesser. And I find it astounding that any women can honestly, truthfully believe these things. And of course, I understand the role of socialization, but you'd think, at least here in the West, where we have more of a choice when it comes to religion, more people be willing to speak up and criticize things that are wrong. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.